Bridges are stronger when built from both sides.
Let's connect.
Let's connect. In the middle.
Hello and welcome to Building Bridges, a show on the Greensboro Television Network that highlights ways members of the public and members of the Greensboro Police Department can come together. I'm your host, Sandra Hughes. On today's program, we'll talk about GPD and media relations. The relationship between the police department and members of the press is vitally important. Why, you ask? Because the news media is the #1 way people get their information about crime, safety, and the police department itself. So, we want to explore this relationship in more than just the details I've given you. News is a subject that is near and dear to my heart. I wonder why. And I'm excited to be a part of it today, a part of this discussion. Let's jump right in. I have 3 special guests with me today. Each of them provides a different perspective about news and about media relations with GPD. Joining me are Susan Danielson. Nice to have you, Susan. She's the Public Information Officer for the Greensboro Police Department. Then we have Meg Smith, who is a reporter for Time Warner Cable News, and Sarah Newell Williamson. She's got all these names, you know, a reporter with the News and Record. I'd like to thank you all for being here today, and let me start by asking each of you to say a little bit about what it is you do. Because when I think police, I think guns and badges and uniforms, but
Right.
You're not.
No, I'm a non-sworn member of the Greensboro Police Department, and a lot of people don't understand the role of the public information officer. So my job is really to facilitate the news between the department and our great media partners. So I help arrange for interviews. I help, if you can kind of think of me as like a small newsroom for the police department. I prepare most of the news releases that come from GPD. You met Officer Watkins previously. She handles the social media aspect of GPD, our Facebook and our Twitter, and I manage the website. So any way that we can get information out to members of the public is largely my responsibility.
Well, that sounds like a big, big job. I didn't realize how huge this whole operation is until you and I start talking and we start doing the show.
Right. So if I could make 2 more clones of myself, that'd be wonderful. You know, I would have 2 that could do the job and 1 of me that could relax.
That's exactly right. That's not you. No relaxing.
But I love what I do, and I do think that it's important that we be as transparent with the public as we can and get as much information out to the public as we can, because we really want people to know what's happening in and around their neighborhood, and we want people to know what they can do to keep themselves safe, because that information helps prevent crimes, and we'd much rather prevent a crime than responding to one.
Exactly. All right. Tell us about your job.
My name's Meg Smith. I'm a reporter and occasional producer for Time Warner Cable News 14. So as a reporter, we cover everything from crime to even fun feature stories too, like say with the police department. And as a producer, my role is behind the scenes sometimes, and that means I put the newscast together. A lot of people think the anchors write all their own scripts, but most of them are written by a producer. So that is what I do at Time Warner Cable News 14. And I shoot on my own video too, so I'm both in front and behind the camera.
You are all that, right?
One woman show.
You probably could do one, couldn't you?
Well, I'm taking applications now.
That's right. She's available, folks. That's what she's saying. All right, let's hear about your position.
And I'm one of the breaking news reporters with the Greensboro News and Record, and that's largely crime-based, although I do report on some other things. It deals a lot with the police department, with the breaking crime news, and also some features as well. And like I said, I do some things outside of the crime beat, just depends on what's breaking news at the time. So a lot of police scanners, and I cultivate my relationships with the police department, things that I hear that's going on with police and law enforcement, and just things going on in the community.
So Susan, if anything happened, are you the one to get in touch with them?
funny you should ask, because sometimes they're the ones that tell me that something is happening because I will be focused on something else. So, you know, I do have my computer-aided dispatch, the CAD system, that tells me where all the officers are being dispatched and what's happening, but I don't monitor that all the time. You know, I'm the type of person I need to have a little quiet in order to write and research. Folks like these two are apparently very talented and can multitask and have the scanner going on, the radio going on, the news going on, social media blaring, and then sit down and type a story. I don't have that skill set. So sometimes they will call me and say, hey, tell me about the stabbing that just occurred, and I'd have to look it up on CAD to see what's happening.
How much do you depend on her for what you write, what you report and what you write?
Very much so. Like you said, sometimes I'll hear about a story and I'll call Susan and she'll say, well, let me find out about it and I'll get back to you. But Susan is always my #1 point of contact with the police department and is really wonderful to work with. So we appreciate her very much.
I'm the only point of contact.
No, I know you're good. And about you too.
I do rely on Susan quite a bit. I do have other contacts within the police department as well for information. And there are other sources outside the police department. It just depends on what I need and when I need it.
Yeah.
When I was a reporter and I'd call and ask about something, they would make sure I got to, Susan wasn't here then, but got to a Susan. In other words, officers would say, well, I can't tell you, you have to talk to her. Is there some kind of reasoning for that?
We would like our officers to be able to interface more with the media. Some of them are new. They're a little concerned about what they can and cannot release to members of the media. So they will normally refer the reporter back to me because it's important for us that we vet information before it goes out, especially when we're talking about breaking news or some ongoing criminal activity. And we have to make sure that what we release is not going to hinder the investigation or jeopardize someone's right to a trial. So they will often refer reporters back to me. Now, if they're on the scene of a traffic crash, by all means, they should be able to talk with that reporter about what's going on and let the reporter know what's important to the public, because these folks are our conduit to hundreds of thousands of people. So the officers should feel comfortable and confident to tell them what's going on. Not only what's going on, but why is it relevant to the people who are watching.
And I tell my students, I teach journalism at A&T, I said, don't ever go on a scene and say, well, I see this over here and that's happening. No, 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 no. Get it from somebody, you know, who is an authority, who knows what's happening a lot clearer than maybe the students would do that. Now, you were telling me you do everything.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you intend to do it that way, or is that just how it worked out?
Well, when I was in journalism school 10 years ago at Carolina, I guess even more than that when you count, it's been about 10 years since I graduated, we were taught how to write, shoot, edit, produce. We were taught how to do everything. And when I initially started in the business, I was just a producer. So I would either put together like the noon and the 5 o'clock newscast, or the 5 and the 9, just depending on what they needed. But I've always been extremely passionate about storytelling, and it's not about me being on TV, it's about telling people stories and stories that are meaningful and personal and leave people taking away something other than just, hey, this happened. And so, and I made the transition to reporting with my second job and anchoring. And when I initially started, I had a photographer. And they said, you need to do this all yourself.
Well, I saw it coming.
And then, when the job at Time Warner Cable News 14 came open 5.5 years ago, it was advertised as a one-man band, but like I said, one-woman show is more appropriate. So I love it, though.
And I've seen it run women away. They come in and they understand that they have to shoot, write, edit, then be on air with. And sometimes, I guess people don't understand what that's like every day. and many of them just couldn't take it, couldn't stand it.
I had someone tell me the other day, wow, you're lugging around, 30 pounds of gear. That kind of takes some of the glamour out of it.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, there's not a lot of glamour without doing that. But anyway.
That's absolutely right. Now, it's my understanding that the News and Record has more time on a story in many cases than just it happened this afternoon, you got it on by in the morning.
Well, it depends on what we're working on. I'm breaking news, and our goal is to write for the web first and print second. And most of us reporters should be writing that way. And when I'm out at a scene, I tweet all my information. I'll call to whoever's on our desk with information for what's going on so we can put it online first. And so we may have a print product, but we put everything online first. And so if there's a homicide, say, whatever happens in the print, that's usually sort of a second day story, and what's online is our first day story for that.
Yes.
And let me tell you, she's relentless.
Is she?
Sarah keeps me on my toes because she's incredibly detail oriented, which is something I greatly respect about her. And she will fact check, double fact check, triple fact check to make sure that she has every piece of information correct. And so Sarah will call or text or email me.
Or call again.
Repeat, yes.
To make sure it's right.
to make sure it's right. And she'll ask for the smallest detail. And inside of me, I might be saying, why does this matter?
Yeah.
Why is this relevant? But, to her, it's important. And, it may be important to someone else who is following that story. So we try to get her as much info as possible.
I wanted to bring this up, and you probably don't want me to, but when I watch television, I'm a big television watcher. I wonder why. But when you see police stories on television, there's always lots of running and shooting, and also a lot of reporters chasing people down. And I don't believe that's the real life. It wasn't my real life. You ask, but you don't, run with the camera and you running and you yelling out things to the person that you're being interviewed. I don't want people to think that that's what, I don't want people to think that's what you do.
No, it's not. The only time I think you see that is in a situation where someone's coming out of court and, hey, we need to get something from you. But no, we try very much to be respectful of people when we do stories and respectful of their space. And, there is obviously that pressure to get the information out there, but we want to do it in a way that's safe, but also accurate as well. And so we like to keep that level of respect there.
Okay.
And I appreciate the flexibility of people who are trying to get their stories. We're a mid-sized police department, which means that in some instances we have one person who specializes in a topic. In other, depending upon what the issue is, we may have 2 or 3 people. So sometimes we have to respectfully decline an interview just because we don't have the subject matter expert available. It's not that we don't want to get the story out, we do. It's just a matter of availability of resources and people.
When I see reporters on some TV dramas, they look like pit bulls, just going after somebody. I was never one of those, and I know that you are not either. Because I think normally it doesn't happen that way. Because we've got too many Susans around town, the world, the country, that can help us without us looking like we're, going after throats or whatever.
Yeah.
You can aggressively pursue information without being harsh about it, without being in somebody's face.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about.
But there is sometimes some information that you would like more access to at the same token.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but it doesn't take that screaming and running.
No.
I'll tell you. Where do you want your police department to move forward to build bridges?
Sure. I would ultimately love for every police officer to be a spokesperson for the police department, for every officer to have the confidence and the skills and the ability to talk with members of the press in an informal, authoritative, and personable way to help get the story out and get the information out. Every one of our police officers is an ambassador for the police department. And so, you know, when viewers or people who read the newspaper see an officer, see that officer in uniform, or see a quote attributed to the officer, that is a voice of authority that builds trust and confidence within the community, trust and confidence about GPD. So I would love for every officer to be able to confidently go address media and help them do their jobs.
So how are you handling making sure that the community is not afraid of the police department, but they're all getting along?
I think you're talking about building bridges, and I think like any relationship, you know, it has taken some time and trust for the police department to know that I'm not going to burn you. I'm not going to report, just like you were talking about, something that's, you know, may or may not be factual. And so, you know, like I said earlier, our job is to definitely meet that deadline and to get that story out there, but as factually and as truthfully as possible. And also, you know, we do have to meet that deadline. But what I always try to do with a story, particularly about crime, is try to find something that's positive to come out of a negative story, and to give somebody a nugget of something to take away versus, hey, you know, this just happened, but what can we learn from this?
Now, in your position, you have to have lots of stories every day for the News and Record. How do you decide which ones you take? Because so many of them are alike.
Well, some things, if there's, all shootings are important, but if there is a shooting where someone has non-life-threatening injuries, I'm not going to pay as much attention to that as if someone has a critical injury or something that's a little bit higher in stature for crime level, or if there's a much more serious assault, or police are pursuing something much more aggressively, or if there's a more in-depth feature on the police side, I'll pay a little more attention to something of that nature.
Okay, so there's, let's say you have 10 stories or about the same thing. You have to find the one or two that really would hold me as a reader.
Or if there's a trend, probably about 3 months ago or so, there was a series where I believe it was break-ins at A&T and UNCG. It was a robbery ring, and Detective Tyndall was working that, and those were all connected. It didn't seem like it at first, but they were stealing a bunch of electronics, and I mean, that captured my attention.
So here you got a story.
So I mean, it was a little one here and a little one there, and separately they weren't very much, but all together, I mean, that was important to the community and the students.
Yeah.
So.
I used to love it in news when you get something like that it wasn't this just one little girl who lost her iPhone, you know, and everybody was losing them in some way. I am so interested in talking more about building bridges because I run into people today that are just, they see a black uniform and scares them to death, you know, just, whoa! I had my little badge on one day, it was just a pin, and I thought a young man was going to faint. And so I started to call the police because I thought surely he's done something if seeing me is going to make him that scared. How can volunteers help what you do, or can they?
Yes, they can help, because if we have folks who have skills in photography, I would love to be able to have a large library of stock photos.
Wonderful.
That I can send out.
Okay.
If they have journalism skills, we take interns, you know, I'll give them a couple of stories to write.
Okay. Well, we'll talk more about that. This conversation certainly has provided us a good deal of insight about the news industry. I see how each of you relies on the other to keep the public informed about issues that are really, really important to them. We'll talk more about news and media relations when Building Bridges returns after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back to Building Bridges, a monthly show that brings together police and the community members to make our city safer. I'm your host, Sandra Hughes. Today, we're talking about how media relations between GPD and reporters affect the news. Continuing the conversations, we have Susan Danielson, who's the Public Information Officer for the Greensboro Police Department. Nice to have you. We've got Meg Smith, who is here from Time Warner Cable News, and we have Sarah Newell Williamson, a reporter with the News and Record. Now, ladies, in the previous segment, we talked about how news is made and how different media interacts with the Greensboro Police Department. We've heard some good things about the professional relationship you share, and you keep it together so the community can be informed. But in any relationship, there's occasionally a little tension. So let's talk about that for a bit. And what are those tension points? And I can tell you one for me was when I try to get him, and you just can't get the information. Yes, so is that one of the main tension points?
It is. It's frustrating for me and the police department, and it's quadruply frustrating for these folks here who have got to tell a story quickly, right? Or they've got space to fill, whether it's online or in print or on a broadcast. It is frustrating, but for us, we have to be very careful about the type of information that we release. We have to take a lot of things into consideration. Primarily, how an investigation is ongoing. Early on in an investigation, we may not know what information needs to be withheld in order to find the person or persons accountable for that crime. So we're going to be a little careful as to what we say until we're absolutely confident that we can release that information without it jeopardizing the investigation or someone's right to a fair trial. We have to take all of that into consideration. We also have to think about the people that we're serving. There's a lot of people who are affected by crime. Not only the victim, but you've got the victim's family, you've got the offender, the offender's family, and so we have to preserve those relationships as well. And so if we are a little too insensitive to anyone that's involved in that crime, people are going to be more reluctant to come forward and approach us. So we have a lot of things that we need to balance, and I know it's frustrating for you guys.
Is it frustrating for you guys?
At times, yes. I mean, to be honest, the thing is we all have a job to do, and I know Susan has a job to do, and I think Sarah can attest that as well. We all have a job to do, and we all, respect each other. So, like I've said before, my job is to get the information out as quickly as possible, but to not step on any toes and try to preserve and maintain that relationship that we have with Greensboro Police.
So do you have a time limit with yours? Are you also trying to do it as quickly as possible?
Yes, I would like information as quickly as possible. Just because we're print doesn't mean I don't want my information as soon as possible. But I will say Greensboro tends to be a little more cautious in releasing information than other law enforcement agencies in other parts of the state that I've worked with. 911 calls, I know that you all have to sign off with before I get those, and you tend to wait a little bit longer than other agencies that I've worked with to release those. And another tense point for us is when we're at crime scenes, the media will be pushed back a little bit farther, and we'll see neighbors and other people walking, 15 yards closer to the scene, and we're like, why can they walk that close and we are 15 yards back? That does not seem fair to the media.
And it's not fair. And so that is a continual point of education that I have for our leaders that are at the crime scenes. And what I tell them is, if you allow a neighbor, if you allow a member of the public to be there to see that, then the journalists have that same right. Now, we do set up media staging areas. It doesn't mean that you are restricted to that, but that's just a central place to have everybody so that when it's time for the captain or the lieutenant or the chief to do a stand-up news conference, you guys are all assembled in one spot. But that you bring up is indeed frustrating, and it is not right. And so if that happens to you, either call me or ask to speak to the on-scene commander, because you have the same freedom of maneuver as John Q. Public.
And if something happens at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you're really under the gun, aren't you?
Yes. 5 o'clock's the magic
That's
number.
right. So how do you handle the tension and stress it takes to put together something in a couple of hours that's going to be seen?
A really good example of this, I think, is the unfortunate incident that we had a couple of weeks ago with the 2 A&T students that were shot and killed. And we found out, Greensboro police were great. They gave us information early, and we even got a neighbor that was near there. But there was a 2 o'clock forum at the university. The university police chief was speaking. Students were asking questions about safety. And I had to take that and put it all together in a nice, neat little bow for 5 o'clock. And so I guess you just try to do as much legwork as you can beforehand and hustle. And again, my point in that story, what I really wanted to get out there was talk about the concerns of the students, but the police aspect of it that we really wanted to emphasize was if anyone has any information, please come forward and let us know, because that was just a tragic, terrible situation. And kind of on a personal, it does affect us as reporters. I felt terrible for those families. And so those are a little difficult to cover sometimes. But then when you have the added deadline, it's even more difficult.
That's true. And the other thing that I tell my students is I'm asking you to go out and shoot a package, give me a story, and so bring it to me next week when you come to class. And then I said, but if you get a job in media, you got to bring it in today.
Right.
Get started this morning.
That's so funny you say that, Sandra, because I just said to somebody the other day, I said, man, in journalism school, we had a week to put the story together.
Yep.
I have 2 hours.
That's exactly
Times
right.
have changed.
Somehow.
That's right. That's right. But I do want to stress that we do have a mutual need and respect for each other. As I stated at the beginning of the show, they are our greatest conduit to all of the people that we are trying to reach. So when you say, if you have any information, please come forward to Crime Stoppers, that's whatever your viewership is, plus whoever they're talking to, knowing that we need information. When you post that online, it expands the net that we have cast trying to get people to come forward, because we know that we the police cannot prevent or solve crimes on our own. We really need the great folks in the media to help us do that.
Now that makes me feel good, because we basically for the last several weeks have been talking about building bridges. And that's what you're talking about. It's not that you're trying to keep anything back from the reporters that are looking for the story. We're trying to put it together.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so have you noticed any actions or anything that's happened, say, in the last 6 months that might be helping people understand the police department?
This show, I think, is helping people understand the police department. I think as our reporters become more seasoned and more comfortable with the police department and more in tune to what is happening within GPD and within the community, they feel more comfortable coming to us, either with stories that they hear from viewers or stories that they think of on their own. I would, continue to nurture and facilitate those relationships. And as you get new folks in, I'd love to be able to just sit down with them and chat with them over a cup of coffee and a very fattening cupcake and talk about how we can work together.
Cupcakes always get people in.
It's the sugar.
It is
They
like
get the
sugar.
conversation flowing.
That's right.
It is. Now, in the few minutes we've got left, I'd like each of you to sum up the key messages that you'd like to leave with our viewers and what you want them to remember when something happens. Susan.
Right, so what I'd like for the viewers to know about our media relationship is that we do have a mutually beneficial relationship, that it is not adversarial, at least not from our perspective. There are some tension points, but we will work through them as best that we can. GPD really does strive to be as open and transparent as possible, and that is especially true when something bad happens in the community.
Right.
Because we want to make sure that whatever it is that has occurred is put into some type of perspective or balance, and so people don't have a fear where none is needed.
Yeah, this running fear. What about you?
I've always had respect for law enforcement, but after doing this for 10 years, I have so much more seeing them and what they do every day to put their lives on the line for us. I've done a lot of stories with police, and I always hear often them say a routine call is never routine because you never know what's going to happen. So I just want police officers to know how much I respect them and respect their job, and thank you for what you do.
Okay. And what about you, Sarah?
It is a relationship with the police department built on give and take, and they trust me, I think, as much as I trust them. I'm not going to burn them because I won't get any other information.
That's
And I would like to
interesting.
be able to rely on them as they rely on me. And public sometimes, I think, is so mad when they can't get information. And sometimes, like Susan said, there is information that they can't release. Sometimes I think there's information they can release. It just depends on the situation, but it is an important relationship that we share.
Well, I do like what you just said. You've got to give them a chance before, instead of getting mad when you don't get something you need. Here again, I watch TV a lot, and I see these stories where something happens and they say, well, we can't tell anybody now. We've got to go to court, got to have, before we label this person as a murderer, and they're not. They're not. Any new goals coming up for building bridges? Any events or?
Oh gosh, we're always trying to expand our community outreach. There's always something new or novel that we would love to be able to do. I don't think that there's one thing that the police department and its members can do to build those bridges. I think it's a synthesis of a lot of different programs and a lot of ways of connecting with people. So we'll keep plugging away at that, trying to continue to build trust and confidence.
Well, I surely enjoy working with you, and very glad to meet you ladies today.
Nice to
This has
meet
been
you
a
too,
wonderful, fun kind of show. Well, I hope you've learned a lot about the relationship between the GPD and the media and how they work together to keep you informed and build those bridges. I certainly enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you did too. Thanks for watching us today, and until next time, I'm Sandra Hughes, so you be safe.
This show was funded in part by the Greensboro Police Foundation, an independent nonprofit organization whose mission is to enhance Greensboro's economic strength by promoting the safest city possible for its residents, workers, and visitors through support of the Greensboro Police Department. For more information about the Greensboro Police Foundation, visit www.greensboropolicefoundation.org.